Prince Harry sat in silence. Cameras weren't rolling, aides weren't present, and Meghan wasn't in the room. He looked at his phone, scrolled through endless headlines, and finally whispered something no one thought he would ever admit. "I can't do this anymore." That's where we begin. Because when a prince who gave up everything for love suddenly admits defeat, the shockwaves are not just personal, they're national. They ripple through Buckingham Palace, through Windsor Castle, through the streets of London, and across every newspaper and TV station in the world. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Now, ask yourself, could you ever have imagined the boy who once walked behind Diana's coffin, holding his brother's hand, would one day walk away from his wife? The woman he said was his salvation? That's the gut punch. And it leaves us all asking, what happened? The beginning was supposed to be magical. The world watched as Harry and Meghan married in St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle in May 2018. Crowds cheered, the Queen approved, and the press hailed it as the perfect blend of tradition and modernity. Harry, the rogue prince who struggled with scandal, had finally found peace in the arms of an American actress who promised love, loyalty, and a new kind of royalty. But as we peel back the layers of this story, what becomes clear is that fairy tales are fragile. They shatter easily. And when they do, the pieces cut deeper than anyone expects. Think about this. Harry once stood on stages across the world and told audiences Meghan had saved him. He claimed she taught him how to breathe again after years of suffocating under the shadow of the crown. He vowed that his marriage was untouchable, that their love was bigger than the monarchy. So why now? Why divorce? Why such a dramatic announcement? One that stunned the entire UK? Let's rewind. Because the signs were always there, hidden in plain sight. Every time Meghan gave an interview, the tension grew. Every time Harry sued a newspaper, the stress mounted. Every time a family gathering turned cold, Harry retreated further into isolation. The press feasted on it, the public debated it, but behind closed doors, the cracks were widening. And here's where the story sharpens into something even more chilling. This wasn't just about love gone sour. This was about betrayal, about power struggles, about family legacies hanging in the balance. Do you remember when Harry and Meghan stepped down from royal duties in 2020? They called it Megxit, but to Harry, it was something else entirely. He described it as survival. Yet survival came with a cost. Financial independence meant Netflix deals, Spotify contracts, Hollywood appearances. And with those came scrutiny, criticism, and relentless pressure. Here's the contradiction. Harry wanted freedom from the spotlight, while Meghan wanted to harness it. He wanted privacy, she wanted platforms. He wanted a family life in Montecito. She wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with Hollywood elites. That clash, it never stopped. Now picture this. Harry, at night, staring at a table full of legal papers, financial reports, and schedules. Meghan, on the other hand, preparing for yet another podcast pitch, another meeting, another brand-building moment. He asks her to slow down. She tells him he's holding her back. That kind of argument doesn't just fade, it festers. And festering, in their case, turned toxic. But here's where it gets even more complicated. The UK never truly embraced Meghan, and Harry never forgave the nation for that. He saw racism in the headlines, cruelty in the tabloids, and indifference in the palace. He blamed them for her unhappiness, for their exit, for their struggles. He fought for her. He burned bridges for her. He gave up his military roles, his royal duties, his titles, and the respect of his family, for her. So when whispers began that Meghan wasn't as loyal in return, that's when Harry began to unravel. Imagine being Harry in that moment. You've lost your brother's trust. You've hurt your father. You've alienated the only family you had left. And the person you sacrificed it all for is now standing on the other side of the line. It's devastating. But that devastation became his fuel. The more he tried to salvage their marriage, the more he realized the foundation wasn't strong enough to survive. And eventually, he reached a decision that even he couldn't believe he was making: divorce. Think of the weight of that word. Divorce. For a royal, it's not just personal, it's historical. It echoes the scandal of Edward VIII abdicating for Wallis Simpson. It recalls Charles and Diana's infamous collapse. It shakes the monarchy to its core. And Harry knew it. Which is why when he spoke the words publicly, "I'm divorcing Meghan Markle," it wasn't just a statement. It was a detonation. The UK erupted. Commentators raced to dissect it. The public split instantly between those who pitted him and those who mocked him. Meghan's supporters claimed she was the victim of a smear campaign. Harry's defenders argued he was finally free. But behind the noise, one question lingered. What exactly drove him to say it now? Because timing matters. With King Charles facing health battles, William preparing for his eventual reign, and the monarchy walking on a fragile line between relevance and irrelevance, Harry's announcement couldn't have come at a worse moment for the institution. Or perhaps, from his point of view, at the perfect one. Now let's stop here and ask, do you think this was a carefully calculated move? Or was it the emotional outburst of a man pushed too far? Because if you believe it was strategic, then Harry may be positioning himself for a new life outside Meghan's shadow, perhaps even a return to the fold he once abandoned. But if you believe it was emotional, then we're watching a man crack under pressure, unable to hold together the world he once swore he'd protect. Either way, the result is the same: shock, disbelief, and a monarchy left scrambling to pick up the pieces. And this is where our journey begins, unpacking not just the announcement itself, but the years of tension, betrayal, and emotional warfare that led to this moment. We'll explore the fights behind the cameras, the whispered conversations inside palace walls, the betrayals by friends, and the silent screams inside Harry's heart. Because the truth is, this story isn't about a divorce. It's about identity. About a man torn between love and legacy, between loyalty and survival. And as we peel back the curtain, you'll see just how far Harry was willing to go, and why, in the end, even he couldn't save the marriage that once defined him. But here's the twist. What Harry revealed after that announcement, the part no one has fully reported yet, will change how you see Meghan, how you see Harry, and how you see the monarchy itself. Because this wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of something far, far bigger. And what comes next? Well, let's just say no one in the royal family saw it coming. Every marriage has arguments. Every couple has disagreements. But not every couple ends up in the glare of the world's most unforgiving spotlight, where every word, every gesture, every rumor becomes a headline. And when you're Prince Harry, the stakes are even higher. This is where the cracks began to show, the breaking point. It wasn't one fight. It wasn't one scandal. It was 1,000 little things that slowly piled up, like stones stacked until the tower topples. Harry once described his marriage as a fortress against the storm of the media. But what happens when the storm rages inside the fortress itself? Picture it, a Montecito evening. Harry sits quietly in the kitchen, scrolling his phone. Headlines blare about Netflix cancellations, about Meghan's rumored meetings with producers, about Spotify deals falling apart. Meghan enters, full of energy, speaking about her next project. Harry interrupts, calmly at first, asking, "But what about us? What about family dinners? What about Archie and Lilibet?" Her face hardens. She sees his questions as criticism. He sees her silence as dismissal. The argument begins small, but grows sharp, bitter, unrelenting. He wants to protect their bond. She wants to protect her ambition. Both think they're right. Neither is willing to bend. And this wasn't an isolated moment. These were the kinds of late-night arguments friends later whispered about, the kind that left neighbors in Montecito wondering if the royal couple was as perfect as the glossy photos suggested. But let's zoom out, because the breaking point wasn't just about household disagreements. It was about Harry's identity. For years, he had been the spare. Overshadowed by William, overlooked by the crown, underestimated by the press. Meghan had promised him something different, a partnership where he was equal, valued, heard. For a while, she delivered. But as time passed, Harry realized he was slipping into a new kind of shadow. This time, Meghan's. Think about it. Meghan's face was on magazine covers. Meghan's interviews went viral. Meghan's words sparked debates across nations. Harry? More and more, he became the side note, the plus one, the silent nodding figure beside her. And for a man who once flew helicopters in Afghanistan, who once stood shoulder to shoulder with soldiers in combat zones, who once promised to carry on Diana's legacy, that role wasn't enough. So he pushed back. He asked for balance, for recognition, for a chance to step forward. But Meghan, insiders say, didn't slow down. If anything, she sped up. She saw herself as a global figure, a humanitarian, a voice for women everywhere. Harry admired that, at first, but admiration slowly soured into frustration. Because with every new appearance, every new deal, every new headline, their marriage became less about Harry and Meghan and more about Meghan Markle, featuring Prince Harry. The breaking point came sharper when Harry noticed something troubling. Every time he reached out to his brother William, every time he tried to send a message to Charles, every attempt to keep one thread of his royal identity intact, Meghan bristled. She wanted a clean break. He wanted a bridge back. And that's the paradox. Harry didn't want to be fully royal anymore, but he didn't want to be fully exiled either. Meghan, however, thrived in the exile. It gave her independence, freedom, power. So what do you do when the person you love is pulling you away from the very roots that define you? You fight. You argue. You accuse. Harry accused her of shutting him out from his family. Meghan accused him of clinging to the past. Harry accused her of chasing fame. Meghan accused him of being afraid of her success. Those weren't just words. They were wounds. And every wound left a scar. The night things boiled over, Harry reportedly slammed his hand on the table, demanding, "Is this marriage about us, or about you?" Meghan's reply cut like glass. "It has to be about me, because for years, everything was about them." Those words haunted Harry. He replayed them over and over in his mind. Because what she meant was clear, her fight wasn't against him. It was against the royal family, the institution, the shadow of history. But in that fight, Harry felt like collateral damage. And this is what outsiders could never fully grasp. Yes, there were money problems. Yes, there were media battles. Yes, there were pressures about their children, their brand, their future. But the real battle wasn't external. It was internal. It was two people who loved each other, but loved two very different visions of life. For Harry, love meant loyalty, sacrifice, and quiet family nights. For Meghan, love meant empowerment, growth, and global recognition. They were speaking two different languages, and no translator could bridge the gap. But here's the cruel irony. The very passion that once brought them together, their defiance against the world, was the same passion that was now tearing them apart. Harry began to feel like he was fighting on two fronts. Against the press, against his own wife. And that's when he started to realize, maybe this marriage wasn't a fortress anymore. Maybe it was a cage. He didn't say it out loud. Not yet. He couldn't. But he felt it in his bones. Every quiet dinner, every awkward silence, every strained smile for the cameras, it all pointed to one conclusion he didn't want to face. Because once you admit your marriage is breaking, you can never unadmit it. And when Harry finally did admit it, to himself, it was like a floodgate opening. Memories of his mother's struggles with Charles. Echoes of Diana crying alone in Kensington Palace. The history repeating itself. He swore he'd never live that life. Yet here he was. And so, the breaking point wasn't a single explosion. It was the slow realization that his marriage had crossed a line it couldn't return from. But what triggered that final acceptance? What moment convinced him that the love story was over? It wasn't an argument. It wasn't a fight. It was something Meghan did, quietly, strategically, that Harry discovered by accident. And when he saw it, he knew the fortress had crumbled for good. But what was it? That revelation would set into motion the announcement that stunned the world. And no one, least of all Meghan, saw it coming. Lights flashing, cameras clicking, red carpets rolled out in Los Angeles. This is where Meghan felt most alive. The Hollywood world she had always wanted, the one she left behind for the crown, and the one she desperately tried to claw her way back into once she was free from royal protocol. But for Harry, those same flashing lights felt like a curse. This chapter is where the rift widened, where Harry's discomfort with Meghan's Hollywood obsession became impossible to ignore. Let's start with the scene. A charity gala in Beverly Hills. Meghan arrives in a designer gown, dazzling, every camera pointed her way. She thrives in the spotlight, networking, laughing with executives, whispering to producers about upcoming projects. Harry, in a tuxedo, stands at her side, but his smile is thin, forced. He shakes hands, makes small talk, but his eyes drift away. He isn't comfortable here. He never has been. This isn't the man who thrived in army fatigues, flying helicopters, getting his boots dirty in Afghanistan. This isn't the man who smiled widest when surrounded by children at his Invictus Games. Here, he feels like a prop. Meghan's husband. The plus one. And that burned. Because remember, Harry grew up hating the media. He watched how they hounded Diana until her final night in Paris. He swore he would never let that cycle repeat. He wanted privacy, peace, safety. But Meghan? She saw opportunity in the spotlight. She saw leverage, contracts, prestige. That's the contradiction. That's the tension. Now, ask yourself this. How long can a marriage survive when one partner runs toward the cameras while the other runs away from them? The answer, as we'll see, is not long. Behind closed doors, Harry begged Meghan to slow down. He argued that every new public appearance chipped away at the very privacy they claimed to have left the UK for. Meghan countered that visibility was power, that staying silent meant letting the tabloids control their narrative. And she wasn't wrong. But Harry wasn't wrong either. That's what made the fight so vicious. Both had truth on their side, but their truths pointed in opposite directions. Now let's talk about Meghan's projects. The Netflix deal, the Spotify podcasts, the talk shows, the fashion partnerships. Each one was pitched as a way to build a brand. But each one also chipped away at their marriage. Why? Because Harry didn't see himself in them. They weren't his voice. They weren't his passion. They were hers. And so the resentment grew. Insiders whispered about tense meetings. Harry sitting quietly while Meghan pitched ideas to executives, her voice carrying the room, his silence growing louder with every passing minute. He hated feeling like he was there for show. He hated the nodding, the smiling, the clapping, and the Hollywood elite noticed. Some whispered privately that Harry looked miserable, that he was drinking more at events, that his laughter felt forced. Meanwhile, Meghan thrived. She was back in her element. The ambitious actress turned royal turned global celebrity. She no longer needed the palace to validate her. She had Hollywood, and she was determined to conquer it. But here's where things get dark. Because Harry didn't just feel sidelined. He felt betrayed. He remembered their promises, the late-night talks in the early days of their marriage when they swore they'd build a quiet, meaningful life. A life focused on service, not spectacle. A life where their family came first. And now? He felt like a supporting actor in Meghan's career. One friend reportedly asked Harry at a dinner party, "Do you even like LA?" Harry's answer was telling. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just said, "I'm here because Meghan is." That's not love. That's resignation. But Meghan didn't see it that way. She believed she was building a foundation for their future, a financial empire that would secure their independence forever. The problem? Harry didn't want independence bought with Hollywood deals. He wanted independence bought with peace. And the breaking point within this chapter? It came the night Meghan signed something Harry didn't know about. A quiet, private contract. A new project lined up without his input. He found out by accident, through a third party, not from Meghan herself. That moment shattered him. Because it wasn't just about the contract. It was about trust. About partnership. About the promise that they'd be a team. And when Harry confronted her, Meghan didn't apologize. She defended herself. She said she was doing it for them, for their children, for their future. Harry heard something else. He heard, "I don't need you." That sentence lingered in his mind. Because what's a marriage without need? Without trust? Without partnership? Hollywood wasn't just Meghan's passion. It became her priority. And Harry, once her equal, now felt like her accessory. And for a man who gave up his titles, his family, and his country for her, that was unforgivable. So ask yourself, was this obsession with Hollywood Meghan's way of reclaiming control, or was it the first true signal that she was never planning to stay in Harry's shadow? Harry thought he knew the answer, and what he did next would change everything. Because if the fights about Hollywood were toxic, the next chapter, the one involving William, Charles, and Meghan's refusal to compromise, was nuclear. And that was the moment the royal family's private feud exploded into something no one could ignore. Family. For Harry, that word has always been a paradox. It meant warmth, safety, and tradition, but it also meant duty, expectation, and pain. And when Meghan entered his life, that paradox only deepened. This chapter, family loyalty versus independence, is where Harry found himself trapped between two worlds. The one he was born into, with centuries of royal duty pressing down on his shoulders, and the one Meghan was pulling him toward, a world of autonomy, freedom, and reinvention. The battle between those two visions would leave scars not only on Harry, but on the monarchy itself. Let's begin with the brothers. Harry and William, once inseparable, They walked behind Diana's coffin together. They laughed through military banter. They leaned on each other during breakups and scandals. They called each other the only ones who truly understood. But that bond shattered the moment Meghan entered the royal sphere. William tried to warn Harry, whispering caution. "Are you sure she's the one?" Harry heard criticism instead. That seed of mistrust grew, watered by years of headlines and heated arguments. Now imagine the scene. Harry flies back to the UK for a quiet meeting at Clarence's house. It's just him, William, and Charles. Meghan stays behind. Harry arrives hopeful, wanting to bridge the gap, desperate for reconciliation. But the conversation spirals. William questions Meghan's choices. Charles urges Harry to think of the crown, of stability, of duty. Harry bristles. He feels they don't understand, that they've never tried to understand. The room grows tense. Words sharper than swords fly. And in that moment, Harry realizes something devastating. His wife and his family are pulling him in opposite directions. Now, pause here and ask yourself, what do you do when your wife demands loyalty and your father and brother demand duty? Who do you betray, your blood or your marriage? Harry chose Meghan. Time and time again, he chose Meghan. He cut ties with his military roles. He gave up patronages. He walked away from royal duties. He defended her against the palace machine, against the press, against his own kin. But Meghan wasn't satisfied with half measures. She wanted complete independence. No threads tying them back to the monarchy. No compromise. That clashed with Harry's heart. Because deep down, despite his anger at the institution, despite his resentment of the tabloids, he still longed for connection with his family. He still wanted Archie and Lilibet to know their cousins, to have some bond with George, Charlotte, and Louis. And Meghan? She saw that desire as weakness. Insiders recall arguments where Meghan accused Harry of running back to the people who hurt us. Harry fired back, asking if cutting them off entirely was healthy. The fights grew louder, more vicious, more personal. And then came the incident that pushed things past the point of no return. One evening, after another heated discussion with William, this time over the phone, Harry returned to Meghan shaken. He'd begged William to give them a chance, to let the children meet, to rebuild the brotherhood. William, firm and unyielding, said, "Not while Meghan is still driving this wedge." When Harry repeated those words to Meghan, her response was ice cold. She reportedly told him, "Then you choose. Them or me." Imagine the weight of that ultimatum. Harry stood frozen, haunted by the memory of his mother, torn between two worlds. He thought of Diana, how she had been trapped between duty and freedom, between the monarchy and her heart. He realized he was reliving her torment. But unlike Diana, Meghan demanded a clean cut. Harry chose her, again. But that choice came with bitterness. Because he didn't want to choose. He wanted both. He wanted family and freedom. He wanted loyalty and independence. And in failing to have both, he began to lose both. He lost William's trust. He lost Charles's confidence. He lost the palace's respect. And slowly, he began to lose Meghan's patience. Because here's the truth. Meghan didn't want a man torn between two worlds. She wanted a partner fully committed to hers. And Harry couldn't be that. Not completely. No matter how hard he tried, he still carried the Windsor blood in his veins. This is the contradiction that ate away at them. Harry wanted to build bridges. Meghan wanted to burn them. Harry wanted to protect the family he had. Meghan wanted to redefine it entirely. And when those visions clashed, the marriage began to fracture beyond repair. But what truly broke Harry wasn't William's anger, or Charles's disappointment, or Meghan's ultimatum. It was what happened next, something private, something whispered in palace corridors. A revelation that made Harry realize the divide wasn't just emotional. It was strategic, because Meghan wasn't just resisting reconciliation. She was actively working to ensure it never happened. And when Harry discovered how far she'd gone, his loyalty wavered for the first time. That was the moment he stopped defending her blindly. That was the moment the fortress began to crumble from within. And it led directly to the financial storm that nearly bankrupted not just their brand, but their marriage itself. Money. For most families, it's a source of stress. For Harry and Meghan, it became the silent poison in their marriage, the unspoken tension that turned love into resentment, and resentment into accusations. This was the financial storm. Imagine this. A couple leaves the royal family, vowing to be financially independent. The world applauds the bravery, the audacity, the defiance. But independence comes with bills. Enormous ones. Security, staff, travel. A Montecito mansion with 9 bedrooms, 16 bathrooms, and endless upkeep. Nothing about their life was cheap. And without the crown's financial umbrella, every expense suddenly mattered. At first, the world believed they were set. Multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify, book advances, speaking engagements, luxury partnerships. From the outside, it looked like they were thriving. But behind closed doors, the numbers told a different story. Harry had never handled money before. He grew up in palaces, not budgets. His expenses were always covered, his security always guaranteed. Meghan, however, knew the game. She had built her own career before Harry. She had paid her own bills. And now, she saw opportunity everywhere. Contracts, sponsorships, brand deals. Harry saw pressure. Meghan saw power. This clash over money was inevitable. Picture the arguments. Harry pacing the Montecito kitchen late at night, spreadsheets in hand, muttering about unsustainable spending. Meghan countering sharply. We need to invest to grow. He wanted to cut costs. She wanted to expand. He wanted simplicity. She wanted luxury and influence. But here's the deeper cut. Harry began to realize that their financial empire was built not on stability, but on drama. Their value in Hollywood wasn't about their charity work, their children, or their humanitarian goals. It was about their feud with the royal family. Every headline, every interview, every revelation about the Windsors was currency. And Harry hated that. Because what did it mean? It meant their marriage, his life, was monetized. His pain was content. His rift with William and Charles was marketable. He felt exploited, not just by the media, but by his own wife's ambitions. Now, pause and ask yourself, how long can a man live with the knowledge that his trauma is his income? Harry tried to escape that cycle. He pushed for projects like Invictus Games, meaningful documentaries, causes close to his heart. But those didn't sell as well as Meghan's podcasts, Meghan's tell-all moments, Meghan's celebrity connections. The imbalance grew. And then came the disaster. Spotify pulled the plug on Meghan's podcast. Netflix began reconsidering future deals. Executives whispered that the Sussex brand was losing shine. Suddenly, the cash flow slowed. And the expenses? They didn't. Tense dinners turned into shouting matches. Harry accused Meghan of overreaching, of biting off more than they could chew. Meghan accused Harry of lacking vision, of being afraid of success. At one point, Harry reportedly asked, "Why do we need a house this big? Why do we need all this?" Meghan's reply cut like a blade. "Because we're not just any family, we're the Sussexes." To her, the mansion, the cars, the staff, they weren't luxuries. They were symbols, proof that she had escaped the cage of the monarchy and built her own empire. To Harry, they were chains, proof that he had traded one prison for another. But then came the moment that truly shattered him. A document. A contract Meghan signed quietly, without telling him. It was another deal. Another Hollywood project. Harry discovered it not through her, but through an email forwarded to him by mistake. When he confronted Meghan, she was unapologetic. She argued it was for their future, for their children. But all Harry could hear was betrayal. Not financial betrayal, emotional. Because a marriage built on partnership now felt like a business where one partner was acting alone. That night, Harry reportedly told a close friend, "I don't know if this is marriage anymore, or a merger." Think about that line. A merger. That's how he saw it. His love story with Meghan Markle had become a corporation. The financial storm wasn't just about money. It was about trust. It was about Harry realizing that every decision Meghan made tied them deeper into a world he never wanted. It was about the creeping suspicion that Meghan wasn't just fighting for their survival. She was fighting for her own empire, with or without him. And here's where the storm turns deadly for their marriage. Because once trust in money breaks, trust in everything else soon follows. Harry began questioning her friendships, her business dealings, her loyalty. He started seeing ambition not as a strength, but as a threat. And Meghan? She began seeing Harry not as a partner, but as an obstacle. The financial storm wasn't just about dollars. It was about identity. It revealed the fundamental divide between them. Harry wanted peace. Meghan wanted power. And when those desires collided, the storm tore through their marriage like a hurricane. But if you think money was the only betrayal, think again. Because what Harry discovered next wasn't written on a contract or in a budget spreadsheet. It was whispered by the very people Meghan once called her closest friends. And when Harry realized how deep those betrayals went, he finally understood that this wasn't just a financial storm. It was a war, and the casualties would be far more personal. Trust. In any marriage, it's the glue that holds everything together. For Harry, that glue was already cracking under financial pressures, royal tensions, and Hollywood distractions. But what came next, the betrayals within Meghan's own inner circle, shattered it completely. This is where the story shifts from private arguments to public humiliation, where whispers from Meghan's closest friends began to filter back to Harry, leaving him wondering, if he couldn't trust them, could he even trust her? Let's set the stage. When Meghan married Harry, she brought with her an entourage, a circle of confidants from her Hollywood and Toronto days. Jessica Mulroney, Serena Williams, Oprah, Marcus Anderson, and a handful of others who hovered around her like satellites. These weren't just friends. They were her allies, her sounding boards, her lifeline outside of the royal bubble. Harry didn't mind at first. He wanted her to feel supported. He welcomed them, laughed with them, even leaned on them during the early battles with the British press. But soon, he noticed something troubling. Stories, leaks, headlines that seemed oddly specific, too detailed to come from tabloids alone. Private conversations appearing in print, arguments twisted into clickbait. At first, he brushed it off. Coincidence, he thought. Bad luck. But as the pattern grew, he began to suspect that someone inside Meghan's trusted circle was talking. Now, imagine the paranoia. Every time Meghan took a phone call, every time she whispered to a friend, Harry wondered, will this end up in tomorrow's papers? Will this be the next viral headline? And then, the bombshell. Jessica Mulroney, the friend Meghan once called her sister. Their bond went back years, forged during Meghan's Suits days in Toronto. Jessica had styled her, supported her, defended her. Meghan even gave her a front-row role at the royal wedding. But then came the scandal. Jessica was accused of exploiting Meghan's name to silence critics. Allegations of tone-deaf behavior exploded online. Meghan, facing backlash, distanced herself, quickly, publicly, coldly. Harry watched in disbelief. One day, Jessica was Meghan's ride or die. The next, she was gone. Erased. That rattled him. Because if Meghan could cut off her sister without hesitation, who else was disposable? Would he be next? But Jessica wasn't the only one. Serena Williams, once paraded as Meghan's closest friend, quietly faded too. Insiders noticed Meghan's name disappearing from Serena's interviews, her social media mentions dwindling. The same pattern, intense closeness, followed by silence. Harry asked Meghan about it. Her replies were vague. People change. Friends drift. But Harry didn't believe it. Not when the leaks continued. Not when rumors swirled that Meghan confided in friends who turned those confessions into leverage. And then came Oprah. Harry had been hesitant about the tell-all interview. He worried it would burn every bridge left with his family. But Meghan insisted, encouraged by Oprah, convinced this was their chance to speak their truth. The world watched as the Sussexes sat in Oprah's garden, revealing intimate details about royal life. Meghan was praised by some, condemned by others. Harry? He was gutted. Because the fallout wasn't just external. It was personal. He felt exposed, raw used. His private pain became a global spectacle, replayed endlessly on TV, debated in Parliament, dissected in tabloids. And who had pushed hardest for that spectacle? Meghan's circle. The same people Harry now suspected of feeding the very chaos he was trying to escape. But here's where the story turns darker. Harry discovered messages, quietly, accidentally. Not direct betrayals from Meghan herself, but from those around her. Emails hinting at narratives to be shared. Conversations about positioning Meghan as the victim. Words that made Harry realize his life, his struggles, his trauma were being weaponized for public sympathy and private gain. The paranoia deepened. Harry stopped trusting Meghan's friends. He grew cold at parties. He refused to attend gatherings. He told Meghan flatly, "I don't want them in our house." She pushed back, fiercely. To her, her circle was her oxygen. They reminded her of who she was before Harry. They validated her choices. They strategized with her. And without them, she felt isolated. But Harry saw something else. He saw betrayal. Not just from the friends, but from Meghan herself, for defending them over him. Imagine the fights. Meghan shouting, "They're my friends, Harry." Harry firing back, "They're using you, and you're letting them." Meghan snapping, "At least they understand me." Those words hit Harry harder than she realized. Because what they implied was brutal. She felt closer to them than to him. And then came the final crack. One evening, Harry overheard something he wasn't meant to hear. A phone call, Meghan speaking to a confidant. She complained about Harry, about his reluctance to embrace Hollywood, about his resistance to her projects, about his longing for reconciliation with William. She described him as stuck in the past, too fragile, not ambitious enough. Harry froze. It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. Casual, frustrated, almost dismissive. For the first time, he wondered, did Meghan still see him as her partner, or had he become her liability? That realization gutted him. Because in that moment, he understood that Meghan's inner circle wasn't just betraying him by accident. They were reflecting something Meghan herself was projecting. She wasn't protecting him. She wasn't defending him. She was confiding in them, complaining about him, perhaps even planning without him. And that was unforgivable. The betrayal of friends was painful. But the betrayal of hearing his wife's voice framing him as weak, that was devastating. From that moment forward, Harry withdrew. He grew colder, quieter, more distant. Meghan noticed, of course, but she misinterpreted it as sulking, as resistance. She didn't realize he was grieving, the slow death of trust in their marriage. And when trust dies, everything else begins to die with it. But the deepest betrayal was yet to come. Because while Harry was stewing over friendships and loyalty, another battle was brewing. This time, it wasn't about friends. It wasn't about Hollywood. It wasn't even about family. It was about their children. And when Harry learned what Meghan had planned for Archie and Lilibet, plans he hadn't agreed to, he realized the rift in their marriage wasn't just emotional anymore. It was generational, and it threatened to tear apart not just their marriage, but the very future of the Windsor line. Children are supposed to unite a family. For Harry, Archie and Lilibet were the proof that he could build a new life outside the royal institution, free, happy, and grounded in love. But instead of becoming the glue that held the marriage together, the children became the battlefield. This is the royal children controversy, and it was one of the ugliest fights of all. Let's start with Archie. From the moment he was born in 2019, Archie's existence was wrapped in controversy. Unlike William and Kate, who proudly introduced George, Charlotte, and Louis on the steps of the hospital, Harry and Meghan broke tradition. No photographs outside the hospital. No media call. No carefully orchestrated royal unveiling. Instead, they kept Archie hidden, revealing him days later on their own terms. Meghan said it was about protecting his privacy. Harry agreed publicly, but privately, doubts began to fester. Because deep down, Harry knew that denying Archie a traditional introduction wasn't just about privacy. It was about separation. It was Meghan's way of cutting ties with the institution, of rejecting every royal expectation. And while Harry wanted to protect his son, part of him still longed for balance. He wanted Archie to be private, but also acknowledged as part of the royal family. That contradiction haunted him. Then came the title debate. Would Archie be a prince? Should he be? Meghan insisted he was being denied a title out of spite, even out of prejudice. She later claimed in interviews that there were conversations about skin tone inside the palace, comments that sent shockwaves around the world. Harry stood beside her, defending her. But behind closed doors, he wasn't so sure. He remembered how titles were passed down, how the rules worked. He knew it wasn't as simple as Meghan painted it. And yet, he kept quiet. Why? Because loyalty to Meghan outweighed his doubts. But silence is not peace. As Archie grew, Harry wanted him to know his cousins, to run through palace gardens with George, Charlotte, and Louis. Meghan, on the other hand, wanted him far from palace influence. She spoke openly about raising him free from the toxicity of the royal institution. Harry, torn between his love for Meghan and his longing for family connection, felt the tension sharpen with every passing year. Then came Lilibet, Born in 2021, her name alone was a controversy. Naming her after the Queen's childhood nickname stunned the palace. To some, it felt like an honor. To others, an insult, an appropriation of something deeply private. Harry insisted it was a tribute. Meghan stood firm that the Queen had given her blessing. But whispers inside the palace said otherwise. Harry began to notice something. Every decision about the children, names, christenings, photos, public appearances, turned into a power play. Take the christening. Archie was christened quietly, privately, with carefully selected photographs released later. Lilibet's christening sparked even more disputes. Rumors swirled that Meghan wanted a high-profile event in the UK to secure recognition for her daughter as a royal. The palace resisted. Harry stood in the middle, once again torn between his wife and his family. But the real breaking point came when Meghan began making plans for the children's future without him. She wanted schools in America, far from British influence. She wanted them raised as global celebrities, not as hidden royals. She spoke of brand partnerships, of future opportunities, of shaping them into leaders of a new era. Harry was horrified. To him, they were children, not commodities, not brands. He remembered Diana's determination to give him and William as normal a childhood as possible. Meghan's vision felt like the opposite, raising them under an even brighter spotlight. One evening, Harry reportedly found documents, plans for potential children's media projects, legal outlines for trademarks under Archie and Lilibet's names. Meghan argued it was about protecting their identities, securing their futures. But Harry saw something else. He saw exploitation, and that word burned in his throat. He confronted her. He demanded to know why she was making these plans without him. Meghan fired back. Because you won't. You're too afraid. Someone has to think about their future. Harry shouted. Their future is not a business deal. That fight lasted hours. Neighbors in Montecito whispered about raised voices, about slammed doors. Harry left the house that night, driving aimlessly through California streets, replaying Diana's warnings in his mind. She had begged him, in her letters and interviews, not to let the media consume his life. And now, he feared, Meghan was doing exactly that, with their children. The controversy spilled into the public too. Debates raged in the press about whether Archie and Lilibet would ever carry royal titles. King Charles, in his private letters, hinted that titles were a burden, not a gift. William, cold and firm, argued the children should not be included in the core royal circle. Meghan fumed, seeing racism and rejection in every decision. Harry wavered, torn, confused, exhausted. And then came the moment that destroyed what little trust remained. Harry discovered that Meghan had secretly approached publishers about children's books, branding opportunities, and even documentary pitches centered around life as a Sussex child. She hadn't told him. He found out through a third party, again. That was the final straw. Because for Harry, this wasn't about money or fame anymore. This was about his children's innocence, their safety, their right to a normal life. And when he realized Meghan's vision clashed so violently with his, he understood something terrifying. This wasn't just a disagreement about parenting. This was a war for their children's future. And if he lost, Archie and Lilibet would grow up as pawns in the same spotlight that had killed his mother. Harry swore he wouldn't let that happen. But to protect them, he'd have to make a choice. And that choice would bring him face to face with the one man he thought he'd never truly reconcile with. His father, King Charles. And what Charles said in their private meeting left Harry shaken to his core. Picture this. Balmoral Castle, late evening. The Scottish air is cold, heavy with mist, and inside the grand but dimly lit study sits King Charles III. He looks tired, older than his years, worn down by the weight of the crown and his own health struggles. The fire crackles, shadows stretch across the walls, and waiting for him is his youngest son, Prince Harry. This was not a public reunion. No cameras, no aides, just father and son, finally forced into a conversation that had been avoided for years. Charles had requested the meeting after whispers of Harry and Meghan's latest plans for Archie and Lilibet reached him. Plans for titles, for Hollywood exposure, for branding. To the king, this wasn't just about grandchildren. It was about the future of the monarchy itself. And so, the intervention began. Harry arrived defensive, already bracing for criticism. He expected lectures about loyalty, lectures about duty, lectures about mistakes. But what he got instead was something that cut far deeper. Charles didn't begin with anger. He began with sorrow. He told Harry that he was repeating history, that he was watching his son walk down the same path Diana had walked, alone, isolated, defiant. He admitted his own failures as a father, how he hadn't protected Diana, how he hadn't shielded William and Harry from the media circus. But then he leaned forward, eyes sharp, and delivered the blow. Harry, you're not saving your children. You're sacrificing them. That sentence landed like a hammer. Because Charles wasn't just talking about Meghan's plans for Archie and Lilibet. He was talking about the cycle, the Windsor curse. A life where private pain became public content, where the next generation was dragged into the spotlight before they could even choose. Harry protested. He defended Meghan, insisted she only wanted the best for their children. But Charles, in a rare moment of firmness, cut him off. No, he said. What she wants is power. And you, my son, you are giving it to her. For Harry, the words were unbearable. His entire marriage had been built on defending Meghan against such accusations. Accusations from William, from the palace, from the press. And now his father was saying the same thing? He stood up, pacing, fists clenched. He accused Charles of hypocrisy, of being a man who had cheated on Diana, who had caused pain himself. He shouted that Charles had no right to judge him, no right to question his marriage. But Charles didn't raise his voice. He just sat there, staring at Harry with quiet disappointment. And then he revealed something Harry wasn't prepared for. Charles had seen documents. Legal whispers about Meghan's dealings, hints of brand expansions, and even suggestions that the Sussex children could be used to leverage future media projects. He didn't say where he got them, but Harry knew. Palace intelligence was vast. And in that moment, Harry's heart sank. Because if Charles knew, if palace staff knew, then others knew too. The very privacy Harry swore to protect for his children was already compromised. The king then gave Harry a choice. A brutal one. Return. Reconnect. Rebuild the family ties. Bring the children back into the royal fold, where they could be protected, not as celebrities, but as Windsors. Or continue down Meghan's path, and risk losing not just his marriage, but his children's innocence forever. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. For once, Charles wasn't speaking as king. He was speaking as a father. But here's the twist. Harry didn't respond with gratitude. He didn't collapse into reconciliation. He exploded. He accused Charles of trying to manipulate him, of trying to buy his loyalty with threats. He said the monarchy had never protected Meghan, never protected Diana, never protected him. And now they wanted to pretend they cared about Archie and Lilibet? The argument spiraled. Charles begged him to see reason, to put aside pride and protect the children. Harry stormed out, vowing never to be controlled again. But later that night, alone in his hotel room, Charles's words echoed in his head. You're not saving your children. You're sacrificing them. For the first time, Harry allowed the thought to creep in. What if his father was right? That doubt was poison. It gnawed at him, ate away at his defenses. For years, he had defended Meghan without question. But now he wasn't so sure. The meeting with Charles was supposed to repair trust. Instead, it cracked Harry's certainty wide open. He left Scotland with more questions than answers. And Meghan noticed immediately. When he returned to California, she sensed the shift, the hesitation in his voice, the distance in his eyes. She pressed him, demanding to know what Charles had said. Harry deflected. He avoided. He drank more. He stayed silent longer. But silence speaks volumes. Meghan realized she was losing her grip, and Harry realized he was losing something even more painful. His faith in the marriage he thought he'd die defending. The intervention had done its job, but not in the way Charles intended. Because now, instead of blindly loyal, Harry was suspicious. Suspicious of Meghan's projects. Suspicious of her friends. Suspicious of the motives behind every new idea. And suspicion, once it takes root, never stops growing. That seed of doubt would soon blossom into something devastating. Because while Charles's intervention rattled Harry privately, what came next, an explosive headline in the UK press, rattled him publicly. And this time, Harry couldn't ignore it. Because the media war, which he thought he was fighting alongside Meghan, was about to turn against them both. The headlines came like thunderclaps. Harry and Meghan sue again. Netflix backlash against Sussexes. Public grows weary of royal rebels. For years, Harry believed that his war with the press was righteous. He had been fighting the same enemy that haunted his mother, the tabloids that twisted truth into spectacle, the paparazzi that turned tragedy into profit. Meghan encouraged the battle, telling him their story had to be controlled or it would be stolen. And so they fought. Lawsuits, statements, interviews, podcasts, documentaries. But here's the irony. The harder they fought the media, the more entangled they became with it. This is the media war, and it was the point where everything backfired. At first, it seemed like a strategy. They controlled their narrative through Oprah, through Netflix, through Harry's memoir Spare. Every revelation was packaged as truth-telling. Every lawsuit framed as a stand against injustice. But the public began to see a pattern. One lawsuit after another. One interview after another. One bombshell after another. Instead of looking brave, they started to look bitter. Instead of appearing strong, they looked obsessed. Harry didn't notice at first. He thought the backlash was just more tabloid venom. But then came the conversations with friends. Invitations quietly drying up. Hollywood producers backing away. Old allies whispering that the Sussexes were too toxic to touch. That was when Harry realized something Meghan didn't, or refused to. Their war with the media wasn't weakening the enemy. It was weakening them. Let's rewind to one of the most infamous battles. Meghan's lawsuit against the Mail on Sunday for publishing her letter to her father. She won in court, but the victory was hollow. The press painted her as manipulative, highlighting her carefully curated image. The legal fees were enormous. Harry stood by her side, proud at first, but then he noticed the toll. Endless paperwork, endless meetings with lawyers, endless stress that drained their marriage. And then came Harry's own lawsuits, against phone hacking, against tabloids, against the very institutions that fed headlines for decades. He told Meghan he was doing it for Diana, for her, for Archie and Lilibet. But late at night, alone, he began to wonder, was he doing it for himself? For revenge? Because every time he won, the press twisted it into another story. Every time he lost, it was humiliation on a global stage. Then came Netflix. The docuseries promised to tell their truth. And it did. But in doing so, it revealed contradictions. Meghan claiming she wanted privacy, while cameras followed her in her kitchen. Harry condemning the media, while monetizing his own trauma for a global audience. The public noticed. The backlash was swift. Suddenly, they weren't underdogs anymore. They were celebrities cashing in on their pain. And the cruelest blow? It wasn't the tabloids that delivered it. It was South Park. An episode mocked Harry and Meghan as hypocrites, demanding privacy while shouting, "Look at us." The parody went viral. Memes flooded social media. Late-night hosts joined the chorus. Harry laughed nervously at first, but inside, he was humiliated. For a man who once commanded respect as a soldier, a prince, a son of Diana, to now be a cartoon punchline, it was unbearable. And he blamed Meghan. Because who had pushed for the interviews, the documentaries, the media blitz? Meghan, who had insisted their story be told on their terms. Meghan, who believed every lawsuit was worth the cost, no matter how high. Meghan. Harry began to feel trapped. Trapped in a war he no longer believed in. Trapped in a narrative he couldn't escape. And the worst part? The war wasn't protecting his family. It was exposing them more than ever. He thought of Diana again. Hunted by paparazzi, betrayed by the media, dying in a Paris tunnel while cameras flashed. He had sworn to avoid that fate. And yet, with every lawsuit, every headline, every interview, he felt himself dragging Meghan and their children closer to it. The tipping point came with one particular headline. A UK tabloid splashed across its front page. Harry's truth or Meghan's spin. Palace insiders questioned Sussex narrative. It wasn't just a smear. It was a dagger. Because for the first time, the press wasn't blaming Meghan alone. They were blaming Harry, suggesting he was complicit, suggesting he was weak, suggesting he had been manipulated. That cut deeper than any insult before. Because Harry could handle being hated for defending Meghan. He could handle being mocked for leaving the crown. But being painted as a fool, a puppet, that was unbearable. He confronted Meghan that night. He told her the media war was destroying them, that they needed to stop, that their obsession with lawsuits and headlines had turned into an addiction. Meghan didn't agree. She argued that stopping now would make them look weak, that the only way forward was to double down. She accused Harry of losing his nerve. And Harry snapped. He shouted that he was tired of fighting everyone. His brother, his father, the palace, the press. That he wanted peace, that he wanted to disappear. Meghan fired back that disappearing meant losing everything they had built. The argument ended with Harry storming out, slamming the door behind him. Neighbors said they saw him walking alone that night, hoodie up, head down, pacing the streets of Montecito. That was the moment he realized the truth. The media war wasn't protecting Meghan. It wasn't protecting Archie and Lilibet. It wasn't even protecting him. It was protecting the brand. The Sussex brand. And for the first time, Harry admitted to himself that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't at war with the press anymore. Maybe he was at war with his wife. But if the media war broke Harry's spirit, what came next shattered his soul. Because losing public trust was painful. But losing private friendships, the very people he thought would stand by him forever, was devastating. And when those friends turned into foes, Harry's isolation was complete. Friendship. It's supposed to be the anchor when the storm rages, the safe harbor when family ties are strained. For Harry, friendship had once meant everything. His army brothers, his schoolmates, the close-knit group who laughed with him in pubs, hunted with him in the countryside, and stood beside him when grief threatened to consume him after Diana's death. But by the time Harry was living in Montecito, those friendships had all but vanished. And the ones that remained, they were turning against him. This is the chapter where Harry realized he wasn't just losing his family. He was losing everyone. Let's start with his old military comrades. For years, Harry had bonded with soldiers who didn't care that he was a prince. In the dust of Afghanistan, in the camaraderie of barracks, he had found something real, something that wasn't tainted by titles or tabloids. But when he left royal duties behind, when he moved to California, those bonds frayed. At first, they still texted, still called. But then came the Netflix series, the Oprah interview, the lawsuits. Slowly, their messages grew colder. Invitations stopped coming. One by one, they faded. And when Harry finally reached out to an old army mate, someone he had once trusted with his life, the reply was chilling. "Mate, I don't even know who you are anymore." That cut deep. Because Harry realized that in pursuing freedom, he had lost the one thing he thought was untouchable, respect. Now let's shift to Meghan's circle. We already saw how friends like Jessica Mulroney and Serena Williams faded. But what hurt Harry most wasn't Meghan's friends leaving. It was his friends leaving because of Meghan. Old hunting buddies said she disapproved of their lifestyle. Pubmates said she didn't trust them, thought they might leak stories. Harry defended her, but he noticed the pattern. The fewer friends he had, the more isolated he became, and the more dependent he was on Meghan. And dependency, for a man like Harry, felt like a cage. Now, here's where things get even darker. Some of the friends who left didn't just disappear quietly. They spoke, whispered, shared private concerns with journalists. Suddenly, stories began appearing in the press, stories that only Harry's closest circle could have known. One headline claimed Harry was controlled by Meghan. Another said he had become a stranger to his old self. Each story stung. Each betrayal twisted the knife. Harry confronted Meghan. He accused her of pushing everyone away. She shot back that those so-called friends were never loyal to begin with, that they were using him for status, that they had betrayed him long before she came into the picture. "Better to have no friends than false ones," she said. Harry wanted to believe her. But in the quiet of night, he felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on him. And then came the worst betrayal of all. A message. An email from someone Harry once called a brother. It wasn't leaked to the press. It was sent directly to him. And it said, bluntly, "You've changed, Harry. You used to be one of us. Now you're just her shadow." Her shadow. Those two words broke him. Because they weren't just an insult. They were the confirmation of every fear he had been pushing down. That he wasn't seen as Harry anymore. He was seen as Meghan's accessory. Think about that. The prince who once strode into war zones, who once stood shoulder to shoulder with his brother, who once carried Diana's legacy, now reduced to being a shadow. Harry sank. He drank more. He grew more distant from Meghan, more irritable with the children, more restless in Montecito. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life. And Meghan? She noticed. But instead of comforting him, insiders say she grew frustrated. She accused him of self-pity, of weakness, of failing to adapt. Their fights grew more vicious. Because here's the tragedy. Instead of uniting against the world, they were now united against each other. And the isolation only got worse. In California, they had neighbors, powerful neighbors. Oprah, Ellen, Tyler Perry, Hollywood elites. At first, invitations poured in. Dinners, galas, red carpets.